Question commonly asked by our clients when they sign up for our programs is, what oil should I use? Of course, they are confused because in the market, you would get the virgin oil, the cold pressed oil, the refined oil, unrefined oil, the raw oil, extra virgin oil. It's really, really confusing. On top of it, you also have the saturated oil, unsaturated oil, monounsaturated oil, polyunsaturated oil. It gets really, really confusing. We get it. So that's why we thought, let's talk about oil and demystify the whole idea about what is oil and what kind of oil should you be using. And first and foremost, let me tell you, there is no specific oil which is right and which is good. It also depends upon what kind of the cooking, and based upon the kind of the cooking is how you would choose which oil is suited for your need. And that's what we're going to talk about today. My name is Rajiv Ambat. I'm the CEO and the Chief Health Officer at NuvoVivo Center for Obesity, Lifestyle Disorders and Research. We are an online health and wellness company, and we help our clients across the globe, help them not just lose weight or lose a few fat or lose few inches, but also manage lifestyle diseases such as diabetes, cholesterol, thyroid, PCOD, fatty liver, uric acid, hypertension. All these are diseases which have some lifestyle connotations. To help, we help them structure a lifestyle which includes both nutrition planning and exercise planning, and help them become look younger and also reverse these lifestyle conditions, and if possible even reduce the medicines that they're having. So that's what we do. All right, so let's delve into the topic, fat, right? So oil, of course, we know oil is a fat. Now, when we talk about fat, fat is like a superset. There are multiple types and varieties. Oil is one kind of it. You can also get, I mean, the larger umbrella, it's actually called lipid. Under that, you would have oil, you would have cholesterol, you would have, certain things such as phospholipids, lecithin, so on and so forth. I'm not getting into the technicals, but oil is a kind of the fat, yeah. And for we human beings, majority of the fat consumption happens in the form of either a form of oil or oil, or in the forms of oil. So what exactly is oil? In a little bit of biochemistry there, it's actually called a fatty acid. So there is a fatty acid, and these fatty acids together might join up together with three fatty acids joining up with a glycerol molecule forming a triglyceride, sometimes two fatty acid forming a monoglyceride or whatever. Essentially, these are all fatty acid compounds, probably joined with another molecule such as glycerol, or it might be just free fatty chain acid or whatever, right? So that's what essentially what oil is, right? So that's what the oil that we see naturally, and that's also the kind of the fat that we also see in other animal fat and things like that. Yeah. So when we talk about fat, I would divide fat based on two aspects. One, of course, depending upon the molecular structure of that fatty acid, that would be the saturated fat, unsaturated fat, monounsaturated fat, etc. I'll explain what it is. And the other division would be based upon how that oil is produced. That would be the raw oil, or the cold pressed oil, or the refined oil, virgin oil, extra virgin oil, and all these things. Is that kind of a category, right? Now let me explain both. Okay, so the first classification I told you with regards to the molecular structure of the oil. So that's the saturated, unsaturated, trans fat, and so on and so forth. Let me explain what it is. I'm going to share the screen here. So I earlier mentioned that fatty acid. So this is basically one of our chapters in NuvoVivo Academy. So you could see here a fatty acid, a saturated fatty acid is there, unsaturated fatty acid. A saturated fatty acid, as the name says, is actually, filled with hydrogen atoms around it, whereas an unsaturated fatty acid has a double bond. And hence, since there is a double bond, it is not filled with hydrogen atoms around it. It is probably less filled with hydrogen atoms around it. So that's basically what a unsaturated fatty acid is. So so there is a double bond. So one double bond would make it monounsaturated. If there are multiple double bond, that becomes a polyunsaturated. Maybe a little too technical. Maybe you might not need this, but you understand what is a saturated and a unsaturated fatty acid. Now, what is the example of saturated fatty acid? Saturated fatty acid would be coconut oil, ghee, butter, etc. Right? So that would be saturated fatty acid. There is a reason why I showed you the molecular structure, because Fatty acids, you would be able to relate to it better now. Saturated fatty acids would be highly resistant to heat. Why? Because the carbon atoms are surrounded by hydrogen atoms. There are no double bonds. So they are much stronger, and most often they will be a little solid because they are very, very well saturated with hydrogen. They will mostly be solid in the room temperature, and are highly heat resistant. So they are smoke point. So smoke point of an oil is nothing but, to put it very simply, is the temperature beyond which, if the oil is heated, the oil disintegrates into harmful products, and maybe some fat might even convert and change the molecular structure into harmful trans fat. I'll explain what trans fat is towards the end. So that's basically what a smoke point is. For saturated fat, the one which does not have a double bond, the likes of coconut oil or ghee, butter, etc., their smoke point is very high, which means they are very heat resistant. So if you are doing some sort of an Indian cooking, or tawa fry, or deep high temperature cooking, saturated fat is a good option to use. So because it is very, very heat resistant. So that's basically about the saturated fat. Yeah. However, there is also this debate which is still going on between the medical world as to if saturated fat is really good for heart or not. There are certain research evidence which says that saturated fat causes cardiovascular diseases. There is certain other researches which actually says that saturated fat is quite all right and it can be had. Anyways, the scientific world is divided as to if coconut butter, ghee, etc. is good or bad. What we at NuvoVivo suggest is that do not completely stop having saturated fat, but be sensible about it. We say of your overall calorie intake, keep your saturated fat intake less than around 10%, or maybe around 10% maximum, not beyond that. So this is what we say. Is we kind of take a middle path around there, because the scientific world is still researching and has not conclusively proven that if saturated fat is indeed bad or good or whatever it is. Yeah. So that's about the saturated fat: oil, butter, ghee, coconut oil, butter, ghee, etc. So use it for high temperature cooking. Next comes the unsaturated fat. I showed it to you that the molecular structure has a double bond. If it is one double bond, that will be monounsaturated fatty acid, and if it is more than one double bond, it would be polyunsaturated fatty acid. So since there is a double bond, quite logically, it will not be as stable at high temperature. The more double bonds that it has, the more unstable it could be. So unsaturated fat, especially polyunsaturated fat, may not be a good choice if you're doing a deep fry or a high temperature cooking. Yeah. But unsaturated fat is known to be heart healthy, especially monounsaturated fat is known to be heart healthy. So you can use monounsaturated fat, but do not do a high temperature cooking or on deep frying and all those things. Don't use a unsaturated fat. What are the example? Monounsaturated fat would be avocado oil, then olive oil, then nuts, almond oil. These are all monounsaturated oil. So that's that which has one double bond. What is polyunsaturated oil? Polyunsaturated oil be the likes of corn oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil. These are all polyunsaturated fatty acids. So do not use them for high temperature cooking because the smoke points would be comparatively lower. Now, that being said, even within unsaturated oil, there are some of these oils whose smoke point is quite higher. For multiple reasons. I'm not getting into that too much technicalities. So logically, you just Google up if you are using one particular oil at home because of your cultural preferences or needs. Just check what is the smoke point, and then compare it with the smoke point of a butter or a ghee or a coconut oil, and then decide if you really want to use it if you are using on a high temperature cooking or not. So that's about the unsaturated oil or the polyunsaturated saturated oil. Yeah. So that's the one type of the classification. So you would know which oil to use depending upon your. So if you're using a salad and you're having a salad and you're not cooking, you just want to add oil after the thing is made. You just want to pour a little bit of oil into it. Monounsaturated oil like an olive oil would be a very good choice for that. Yeah. So that completes the first categorization of oil, which is based on the molecular structure. Yeah, and we know what is healthy, what is not healthy, and how and when and how you should use that oil. The second type of classification is based on how we prepare this oil. And I said that would be raw oil or cold press oil or virgin, extra virgin, refined, and so on and so forth, right? So where is this oil extracted from? Oil is mostly extracted from seeds. It is also extracted from flowers. So that's what the oil is extracted, right? So in the ancient times, the oil or the seeds are put to high mechanical strain or pressure between two grinding stones. Most often these grinding stones would be driven by an ox or some buffalo or something like that. Some animals would be driving that big I don't know what it is called, grinding stone of sorts, and then that's how they would take oil from it. Now here there is no heat application, there is no chemical application, it's just pure mechanical process of extracting oil. Now the good thing about this would be that all nutrients will be intact, especially all antioxidants will be intact, because you're not applying too much of heat into this oil, right? So that's the good thing about raw oil. So raw oil is very good to apply it in your skin because it is rich in antioxidants. It will also smell really nice because all that things, all that polyphenols, all those antioxidants which gives its characteristic smell, taste, etc., would be there in it abundantly. So the raw oil would be good to, apply it in the skin and things like that. The negative point, however, would be that since it has these kind of things, it might go stale pretty soon if you keep it outside or things like that. So that is one problem with the raw oil. And raw oil also, since it has these kind of polyphenols and white stuff like that, when you kind of overheat, sometimes it might give a slight pungent smell or a taste to it, and the smoke point of it will be slightly lower. So that's the normal raw oil. Now cold press would be the next gradation of that. There is no heat application, but it is used with machines and things like that. So that's what a cold press oil is. And then there is virgin oil. Of course chemicals are also used to extract oil from seeds and flowers. And the more heat and oil chemicals that you use, the qualities of the oil, such as the smell, the antioxidants, the taste and flavor and everything, that might come down. Yeah. But the good thing about it would be is that if you use it for cooking, the smoke point is comparatively better. It might not turn so pungent so soon, right? The extreme end of that kind of an oil is called a refined oil. In a refined oil, you refine out everything out of it. It's just pure, simple fatty acids with not much of antioxidants or not much of polyphenols. So hence it might not have that smell. It might not have that taste. Too refined oil, if you even in fact, it is said that if you mix up two different oils from two different seeds, you refine them and then you mix it up together, most often people might not even be able to understand if it is refined oil of this seed or the other seed. That much reduction of the natural properties, so the smell aspects and the taste aspects and the antioxidants would get reduced. So that's about the refined oil. The refined oil would can be used the smoke point will be comparatively higher for refined oil. So that's about the thing. So obviously if you're heating and doing deep fry and everything, use refined oil. But if you want that smell, if you want that flavor, if you want that all the goodness of oil, including the antioxidants and things like that, use the cold press oil or use the raw oil. But the raw oil will not stay like that without going spoiled for long, especially if you're keeping it outside. That's the pros and the cons of the raw versus the refined oil kind of a categorization. So we have seen the two types of classification of oil, and you know what oil to use, how, when, where, and all that. Now let me tell you, oil per gram is fat, right? Per gram of fat is 9 calories. But if you take per gram of carbohydrate or protein, it's only 4 calories. So per gram of fat has more than double the amount of calories. Yeah. And it doesn't stop there. What happens is that carbohydrates, when we eat carbohydrates, most often these carbohydrates comes with water. There will be a lot of water content in carbohydrates, right? For example, if you're eating rice, the rice is puffed up because it's boiled, and each rice grain is actually filled with water also, right? So if I take 1 tablespoon of rice, it would roughly be around 15 grams. Of 15 grams, around 12 grams or so will be actually water, and only 3 grams would be carbohydrates. And I earlier mentioned per gram of carbohydrate is only 4 calories. So 3 into 4, 12 calories is what roughly. So around 10 to 15 calories is what roughly 1 tablespoon of rice has, because it is more water, right? Carbohydrate almost always comes with water. Anything for that matter, any carbohydrate thing that you would speak about is almost always comes up with, filled with water. Fat is not like that. Take a glass of water and put 1 tablespoon of oil. The oil would stay separate, right? It's not going to mix up. So fat is hydrophobic. Phobia means fear. There is this hydrophobic characteristics of oil or fat, so it does not gel in together. So which means if you take 1 tablespoon of oil and say 15 grams, the entire 15 grams is fat itself. And I said per gram of fat is 9 calories, right? Per gram of protein, carbs is 4 calories, per gram of fat is 9 calories. So 1 tablespoon is 15 grams of fat, and that is 15 into 9, roughly 145, 130, roughly around 130 to 145 calories is what we're talking about. So if you have 1 tablespoon of rice, you probably had extra 15 calories. But if you had 1 tablespoon of oil, you have probably had extra around 130 to 150 calories. See, that's where we go wrong. The margin of error for oil is much lesser, for fat is much lesser, because one, fat is very dense in calories. Two, fat will not come with water. Fat will always be, stuck up together with a lot of fat. So hence the margin of error with fat will be lesser. So that being said, do not stop eating fat. Fat is a very important macronutrient. Fat is important for the hormonal balance. Fat is also important for the absorption of many vitamins, such as vitamin A, vitamin D, E, K, etc. These are all fat-soluble vitamins. They will be absorbed into our body only if there is dietary fat, meaning fat in our diet. So fat is important. Do not stop eating fat. Dietary fat is important. If you reduce fat, it might lead up to other problems and complications. Fat is important, but do not cut off fat, but make sure you are careful with the fat. One fat that I want you to completely avoid would be trans fat. Yeah. So in fact, I should have mentioned about trans fat while I was talking about the molecular structure classification that I first told you about. Trans fat is a combination which happens when an unsaturated fat is hydrogenated. So vegetable oil, when partially hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, converts into trans fat. So let me not confuse you. Don't just look at it this way. If the food that you're buying, if it is written hydrogenated vegetable oil, or if you're seeing something like dalda, margarine is most often the trans fat. So these are the things that you need to look out for and reduce. Trans fat brings that texture and taste, and also increases the shelf life of the food. A samosa made with dalda being added into it, I'm not sure if dalda is added in first place, but the trans fat, margarine is a thing, I think, which can be added into samosas, which is made in a commercial, in a bakery or whatever. So the number of days that it would stay there without going stale will be higher. The shelf life of such products will be higher if they include a trans fat, and also give a nice flaky structure. That's why the samosas and stuff that we have, it is nice and flaky and thin, right? It's because we add trans fat into it, and that's why it's giving you that kind of a nice texture and crunchiness and taste and all those things. Trans fat is absolute no-no. It increases cholesterol and it increases the risk of cardiovascular diseases. So look out for trans fat. Companies might not necessarily write it as trans fat in the food items that you're buying. Sometimes they might write it as hydrogenated vegetable oil, because people think vegetable is healthy, so vegetable oil will be good too. And so they wouldn't know hydrogenated vegetable oil is actually unhealthy. So these are the things to look out for. I hope this information was helpful. Make sure you share this and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any queries or questions, we would be more than glad to reach out to you. Reach out to us. Our website is www.nuvovivo.com. You have the spelling written in here. Or you could also reach out on our official support number, which is also mentioned in the comment description, or also on our website. All right, you take care, stay healthy, stay safe, stay young, and stay fit. Take care. Bye.